Hi everyone, welcome to Module 3, where we will be looking at the relationship between technology and the self. So as I mentioned in the introduction, we are going to be looking at an array of topics this time around, and looking at the ways in which our very sense of being and sense of self and self-identity is mediated and impacted by the technologies that we use or have used in the past. So it's a really exciting topic, I think, that will get you thinking both broadly and about your own relationship to technology. So, as I mentioned in the introductory video, we are going to hop right into a review. So let's tune into that review now.
So our last module, we did some macro sociology. We might not have known it, but that is what we did. And what we were doing as macro sociologists is look at the large forces and institutions that shape and control technological innovation. So if you recall, our last lecture series looked at how organizational structure is affected by technology. We looked at technocracies and entrepreneurs as parts of this innovative process. We looked at the ways in which government can both help and hinder technological advancement. And we also looked at two interrelated topics of democratic citizenship and the power of consumer behavior. We also got to know a really elegant model that we will be using throughout the course to guide our analysis of adjudicating social impacts of technologies. So we covered a whole bunch of very helpful topics. And you'll see sort of how these burble up in our subsequent discussions over the next few weeks. So we didn't explicitly talk about macro and micro sociology last time, even though that's sort of what we are engaging in this course. So I thought it would be a good idea if we give you a little preview about the distinction between macro sociology and micro sociology. And this image here is very helpful in the sense that it gives us both perspectives at the same time. So a macro sociologist, for something to be macro, you're meaning the whole or like a big picture. So a macro look at this society here would be like looking at the large institutions and the ways that this social community is structured. For something to be micro, you're starting then to look at individual people and individual people as they relate to small groups in their communities. So it's a difference of perspective that allows us to get a fuller picture, at least sociologically speaking, about how people interrelate and react to technology. If you want a further picture, I have included a very helpful Khan Academy video here that gets you to think about the differences between macro and micro sociology. And what we will be doing here today is engaging both of these simultaneously. And I'll do my best to point out when we're being macro and when we're being micro about our lessons in technology, about technologies and the self. So I'm going to move forward to our warm-up, and you'll find our warm-up on our notebook, and we're going to play a little game. It's what I call a traffic light game, and what we're going to do here is share our responses to this kind of tripart question about technology. So we're going to start off by thinking about one technology that we use daily that we're very pleased to be using. And what you're going to be doing is giving a reason why you enjoy using this piece of technology. So this is going to be our green light, the one that we like, that makes us go. The second question is our yellow light question. And you're going to share one technology that you use frequently but feel pretty indifferent about using. And you're going to give a reason about this example and why you're just generally uninspired by it. And then finally, you are going to give an example of a red light technology. And this is one technology that you avoid using as much as possible because you deeply dislike it. And here you're going to give a reason why you dislike that piece of technology. So I started us off because it's sometimes helpful to have a bit of a model. So for me, I really love using my Nespresso coffee making machine. I think it's elegant and it's easy to use, and it always provides me with a very pleasurable cup of coffee, and it makes me reminisce about times that my husband and I spent in Europe drinking coffee and people watching in some of the public squares. My yellow light technology, I'm pretty indifferent to using the chair that I sit and work in. While it's comfortable enough, it's not comfortable for long periods of time. And at the end of the day, the design of the chair is just good enough. It's not elegant like my Nespresso, but it's not ugly like some other things that I have around my house. My red light technology is that I despise using Facebook. I no longer trust that any information that I post is safe, and I deeply detest how Facebook has allowed itself to be used in all sorts of dangerous and nefarious and even genocidal ways. I am not a fan of Zuckerberg and do not like using Facebook. So I can't wait to hear the things that you come up with. So how about you give it a try right now? Pause this video and hop on over to our Think Stop in our notebook and you give it a try. I look forward to reading your traffic light game responses. Welcome back, everyone. Right now we're going to talk about how technology sort of creates winners and losers, and how that reality, that economic reality, then creates the conditions for subversion and resistance, either through the use of technology or against certain forms of technology. So I want to point out that up until about the 1950s, when economists were figuring out how to best balance the national outlook of economic inputs and outputs, really they were looking at three factors of economic production. They're looking at the kinds of resources that the nation had, so land and other natural resources like oil and gas. They looked at the capacity for labor, so what portion of the population is of working age and what kinds of jobs that they can do. And then finally, economists look at just sheer capital. How much money does a nation have? How much are they taking in? How much are they selling out and paying out? So this model for economic production calculations changes dramatically in the 1950s because economists recognized the value of technology as an economic driver. And just to drive this point home for you and make it come alive, even though I'm not very happy with the Facebook. There are positive economic impacts and contributions that Facebook does make. And I've plunked here some data from Deloitte, which is an accounting firm that looks at the contributions of Facebook from in 2014 and 2015. And what I want to draw your attention to here is just the sheer capital amount and the amount of jobs that Facebook alone was able to add to these economic regions. So in North America, for example, you're looking at $104 billion in impact and 1.2 million jobs. In Central and South America, $21 billion added to the economy with 600,000 jobs. So my point here is that before the 1950s, an organization like Facebook would not have been considered a great means of economic productivity. But now, because of how our world has advanced to exchange and share money on these technological platforms, it's now included in our economic reasoning and outlook. So it's a really powerful and profoundly lucrative area. But of course, with any sort of changes to the macro structure of a society, technology can both be an economic driver, but that economic success can also come at a cost for the society. And technological change is often considered a subversive process that results in modifications or even the complete destruction of established social rules, relationships, and values. And I'm using the example here of a dead shopping center. In many parts in North America, shopping centers have been considered the center of a community. If there was a mall, it always drew people and commerce and considered kind of a hub of society. But with the onset of being able to order products online and have them delivered to one's home, we start to see malls not being able to keep up because people are having their needs satisfied by other means. And while overall society benefits from these technological advances in shipping and transport and online commerce, it does produce dislocations, and it has led to a restructuring of power relationships and a redistribution of wealth and income, and unfortunately alterations to human relationships. On our notebook, I have a little piece talking about the death of the American shopping mall, as well as a video that I would really like for you to watch. It is an architecture professor talking about why it is that malls are dying, but she also gives a really powerful overview to the importance of the mall in North American society and what we are losing out when we have an empty or a dead mall. So how about you take a pause here in this video and hop on over to our notebook and take a look at the death of the American mall. See you in a minute. Hi, welcome back. So as you saw in the video, you got a real sense of the pride of place that the shopping mall had in many communities in North America, and a real appreciation now for how these technological advances cause great dislocations and have led the way to a redistribution of wealth and a change in human social relationships. And of course, part of being a subversive aspect of technology, we do have to ask the question about what people do when they resist technology. So I have a few examples and ideas that we can consider as we're considering how people resist technology. And I'm going to start with the story of the Luddites. So Luddites, and I'm going to pop on over here to our trusty web browser. There, that looks better. So if you were to look up Luddite, what you will get is a definition that talks about how a Luddite is a person who's opposed to new technology or ways of working. And historically, Luddites were an oath-based kind of band of workers in England who worked largely in the textile industry, and more specifically making those fancy tights that people were quite popularly worn throughout the 19th century and earlier. But a Luddite is someone who is so devoted to keeping alive the craftsmanship of their job that they're willing to destroy the equipment. And the term Luddite became synonymous with a person who resists technology. So you can see here in this little picture, these Luddites completely going medieval and dismantling some of the weaving machinery in the factory where they work as a way to resist and show the bosses that they're very unhappy with all of the new industrial technology that would put them out of work or displace their skills as highly skilled craftspeople who are able to make a living through doing what they do best. So while this is a very dramatic example, it's quite common that on the whole, humans do tend to resist new technologies when they've come out. And the Luddites will not be the most dramatic example that we'll talk about in this section. We're going to briefly, in a moment, take a look at the work of Ted Kaczynski, who's also known as the Unabomber, who terrorized the United States for about 20 years, sending mail bombs to targets and publishing his manifesto that was decidedly anti-technology and could be best described as a neo-Luddite manifesto. But I want to return here for a moment to just sort of the general capacity that humans have to resist technology. And, even at one time, something as ubiquitous and as wonderful as the refrigerator was vehemently resisted. If you want to learn a little bit more about why we resist, and there's an article that I've posted here that looks at the work of Professor Juma, who, as we will see in just a moment, addresses sort of this human pattern to resist technology. But this is a great follow-up article to what we will talk about next. And here we go. Diving into Professor Juma's article in a little bit more detail, he points out that people don't fear technology because it's new, but it's because the innovation means losing a piece of their identity and lifestyle. And he points out that there are generally three sources of opposition that people have to new innovations. That first, those who resist technologies and innovations often have commercial interests in the existing products. So it would be fearing that this new technology would put you out of business or really restrict your ability to get access to this existing product or technology. A second reason is that people identify with existing products. It is part of their personal identity. So if that is being threatened by something new and different, many people will hold on. And then finally, a third reason why people resist innovation is a loss of power. Now, when you take these three together, the idea that one's identity and one's way of life will be radically changed by new technology, it makes sense why people resist technology. So, a little exercise for you, a little think stop, is to identify and describe an example of technology that you have actively resisted in your life. And of course, I don't recommend going as far as wrecking or sabotaging the equipment. But if you wanted to share just a little something that you would do or have done, so it could be anything from just avoiding using that product for your reasons to maybe telling other people not to use it, or so pause this video here and you can share your resisting stories in the comment box here. And when you come back, we'll talk a little bit more about Ted Kaczynski. Hi again, welcome back. So before you shared your story about resistance, we were talking about different examples of sort of why people, generally speaking, resist technology. We looked at the example of the Luddites who would quite openly and violently sabotage their equipment. But we have here, in the case of Theodore Kaczynski, a modern and articulate mode of resistance. And what I've done for you is affixed in our notebook an article that you can read about the making of Kaczynski's beliefs about the evil of science, as well as I've posted his manifesto. It's a very quick read, and from there you can get a sense of how he describes his form of resistance. And others have described this manifesto as kind of coming true, and Kaczynski having prophesized the loss of identity and the reasons why we should resist the many technologies that we see degrading our societies and undercutting democracies in our current political climate. So it'd be a really interesting piece for you to connect with on your own and discover sort of what you think about the work of Kaczynski. And of course, there's no defending a person who uses violence to kill innocent people because of this ideological viewpoint. I do have to make that very clear. But I think it is important to read the work of someone like Kaczynski to understand a little bit more deeply for ourselves why it is that we have resistance to certain forms of technologies or certain ways that modern life is playing out. So I highly encourage that you take the time and read this short piece. But before we end this segment, I just want to kind of give us a bit of a conclusion, because what we're going to be moving on to do next is sort of using our insights that we've learned about how we resist technology, or what sorts of technologies that we appreciate versus dislike deeply. We're going to be narrowing down into a more micro mode of evaluation and discovery as we take a look at a number of technologies. So in the next portion, in the next video, you're going to be looking at medical technologies and what they have done to society as well as the human body. You're going to be taking time to look at how the human relationships have been changed due to technology. And then finally, you are going to be looking at how the sense of self becomes changed or causes changes in technologies. So we're going to be doing a mix of micro and macro, but I want you to come back to the insights that you have gained today in this video from looking at modes of resistance and how technology subverts. So that's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.